Yeah, speaking of differences in human capital and the ethnic history of ethnic America by Thomas Sowell, he points out that black immigrants from the British Caribbean, who were slaves and had earned their freedom, they're often called the Black Jews colloquially, and that's because they do so much better than the blacks in the United States. And part of the reason is in the Caribbean, they were actually allowed to own some property even whilst a slave.
Huh.
And because of that, they had better management skills. And then they used that to then work to save money to buy their freedom. And then they immigrated to the United States for better options. And they tend to be at the top of the highest income earning brackets of African Americans. And it's interesting because when they were, like I said, in the Caribbean, they were able to have some private property. I'm guessing kind of like a serf, right? The serf would have his little plot of land and the lord would have his massive estate.
Yeah.
But even a little bit of private property goes a long way, apparently.
At least libertarians are right about having that private property is pretty essential to have strong industrial capital. Like they're right in that regard. They're right to value it to a large extent of their philosophy.
Yeah, you definitely need private property. And this also comes into human capital again, is what are the kinds of people that value private property? Well, we already mentioned the sort of ethnic makeup, Jews and Northwestern Europeans. But the other thing is, what do they have in common? Well, they both have in common the Old Testament. The Jews and the Northwestern Europeans both are rooted in their worldview in the Old Testament. And of course, the Old Testament has strong defenses of private property. Thou shalt not steal,
and strong conservative values.
Yes. And so it's no accident that Jews and Northwestern Europeans, who are so strongly influenced by the Old Testament, tend to be the most successful in business, finance, and industry.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just sort of that amazing that private property can determine a lot of success in societies. This is why I believe that this is why I believe that no one can reach the same level of success of Western civilization because we were able to allow that kind of freedom to own private property.
Yeah. You should talk about China?
Yeah. This is why I think China is like a much weaker society.
What's interesting is that the kind of private property system that we need to have a market economy didn't really exist outside of Christendom. And more specifically, if you look at Weber and his capitalism and the Protestant work ethic, he points out that industrial capitalism begins in Northwestern Europe with Germany and England. And of course, those are both Protestant countries. And then, of course, the United States as well, another Protestant country. And so by 1913, the three great industrial powers were Germany, the UK, and the USA, which are all Protestant countries. And so we see that value system was crucial, as Weber points out, for the development of the norms that allow and concepts that allowed for a market industrial society to develop.
Also, like compared to like countries like Greece and Italy, where they have like much weaker economies and they have like different value systems. Like for example, Southern Italy is a very low trust society. It's not very industrial. It's much poorer compared to Northern Italy, which is more connected to the more Anglo-Germanic world, if anything else.
Yeah. The other thing is too, Northern Italy was far more urbanized during the 14th, actually going back to the 11th and 12th centuries with the Lombards League and the Lombard city-states. That Northern Italy was far more urbanized, so they had more of a larger class of bourgeoisie. Whereas Southern Italy, at that point, right, was occupied alternately by the Romans, the Saracens, and ultimately the Spanish. And so these are all, autocratic regimes that don't value enterprise. And as empires, they want to extract resources rather than build up resources. So Southern Italy, being the sort of occupied by numerous empires throughout its history, had a very different development than Northern Italy, which had some imperial occupation in more recent times. But throughout much of the Middle Ages and Renaissance, had a chance to develop a bourgeois society, like England and Holland did.
Yeah, just it's kind of sad. Like people like people of the Marxists and socialists will demonize these kind of things. Like they will demonize private property and industrialists. That's that those are sort of the threats that will bring down Western civilization. Just having this, well, basically have this mentality of an ungrateful child, sort of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sort of ungrateful child. Now, what do you think of the argument made by many on the alt-right that the immigrants that are coming in to the United States should be kept out because they're low trust people that are going to undermine the values that Americans value?
I think there's some degree of truth to that it will bring down this social capital. It takes, like, the thing about social capital, it takes years, centuries, if not a millennia, to develop and bring out these third world immigrants who comes from different civilizations, different culture, who's not willing to assimilate or even speak English for God's sakes. They're definitely going to cause some conflict among the natives in the United States or any Western European countries. Like I think there's going to be a very strong class resentment to that.
Oh yeah. One of the weaknesses, though, I think in the alt-right analysis of this is that there are plenty of low trust white societies that,
like Southern Italy, for example.
Yeah, but also if in Hackett's book Albion Seed, he talks about 4 different groups that settled in the New World, which come from 4 different parts of England: the Puritans, the Quakers, the Southern gentry, and the frontiers folk. And the frontier folk lived, according to the historical records, they lived a more degenerate lifestyle than the Native Americans. And they were like, the people from the Atlantic coast were just shocked at how badly they lived, where degeneracy was the norm. And then the least degenerate part of the country, New England, due to the Puritans, was also where commerce developed. I wonder if there's a connection there.
I don't know. I think it should be kept like a secret,
Yeah. Keep it a secret, right? It's not important.
Yeah.
But, and another thing is Russians, right? Those are white people, but they have very low trust and very little social capital.
Yeah, the Russians always, like, the sad thing about Russia is it's a very unique society, but I just think to their pessimism and general distrust of their own people, I think they will never bring that type of prosperity. I think the Russians will never experience that type of prosperity, those facts I laid out.
Yeah, and if you want to build social capital, I think Charles Murray is absolutely right, and this corresponds very nicely with some of the research of Unwin that I mentioned earlier, that monogamous, non-degenerate relationships are really required to build up this capital. Now, one of the interesting things, now, since I haven't read the book, I don't know if he brings it up, but one of the key reasons why the African American community has failed to build social capital was, though he didn't put it in these terms, it was pointed out by Moynihan in the Moynihan Report, where he pointed out in the 1960s that the complete collapse and absence of families for many young African Americans leads to these pathologies, and that the solution would be for the government to create incentives that would seek to build strong families. And of course, Moynihan was ignored, unfortunately, And I think we can continue to see the legacy of what he predicted would happen.